Hello gamers, and welcome back to Papa Brad's Gaming, the channel where we explore classics and dive into the latest in the gaming world. Today is a special day, as we're going to play a game on the 50th anniversary collection from Atari on the Atari VCS. What better way to honor this iconic brand than to take a look at one of their gems from the past? Of course, I'm talking about the classic Cloak and Dagger. So grab your joysticks and join me on this nostalgic journey. Let's get it started. Cloak and Dagger was released by Atari in 1983 during the golden age of arcade gaming. Developed by Atari and based on the 1984 film of the same name, this title blends espionage, action, and strategy in a unique way. Cloak and Dagger is a very special movie to me because I saw it as a child. It was on a double bill with The Last Starfighter. I believe it was the first movie they played, and The Last Starfighter was the second movie. But I remember because it was so rare to go to a double bill movie like this. But this is where I saw the film Cloak and Dagger. Let's take a look at a trailer for the movie Cloak and Dagger.
His game is make-believe. Their game is murder, spying, and sabotage.
This is starting to get good.
What?
Just like Cloak and Dagger.
Now any move could be his last.
Trying to kill us.
Now, come on, this is Cloak and Dagger. For real, it's what you always wanted.
Cloak and Dagger.
Now playing at a theater near you. Consult your local listing.
The game follows the adventures of a character named Jack Flack, a spy trying to thwart an evil plot. What sets Cloak and Dagger apart is its combination of arcade-style shooting and strategic elements. It's not just a mindless button mash. You need to think on your feet and use the dual joysticks to make it out of the levels. Considering its release in the early 80s, Cloak and Dagger features graphics that were ahead of its time. The character sprites are well detailed, and the environments have a distinct style that captures the essence of the spy genre. In terms of sound, the game delivers with catchy and suspenseful soundtrack that enhances the overall experience. The sound effects from gunfire to explosions add a layer of immersion that was quite impressive for its era.
In 1976, Atari struck a deal with media powerhouse Warner Brothers in order to be able to financially support the release of what would eventually become the highly successful Atari 2600 home video game system. This alliance over time would reshape Atari in both good and in bad ways. Perhaps accidentally, however, it did create the first true multimedia company, as Atari would go on to become the first true corporate video game powerhouse in the USA. This also brought Atari into the umbrella of other Warner-owned properties, from film, television, and even comic books. This mixing of movie and television properties in the early days of video games provided several successes for other companies, such as the Disney Bally Midway Tron Enterprise, and some interesting failures within Atari, such as the infamously panned Atari 2600 cartridge for E.T., which, full disclosure, I actually really loved as a kid. Atari didn't make its first official arcade movie crossover until May of 1983, when they would release an arcade adaptation of George Lucas's Star Wars film in the arcades. This first-person perspective on-the-rails style space shooter was a huge success for Atari and an instant arcade classic. Thanks to a combination of a great licensed property, who didn't want to fly an X-Wing fighter after seeing the original Star Wars film the first time, neat wireframe vector graphics, unique controller, and an amazing dedicated cockpit version of the game, and even digital voice samples for the movie, Star Wars would capture the hearts and quarters of arcade video game fans for generations to come. Unfortunately for Atari, they wouldn't piggyback necessarily off the success of Star Wars with their next arcade movie tie-in offering, Firefox. Released in January of 1984, Firefox was based on a Cold War-themed action movie of the same title, starring Clint Eastwood, as he attempted to steal a top-secret fighter plane from the USSR, or something. The movie was a moderate success at the box office at the time, but not so much with critics. Firefox would be Atari's first and only arcade game based on Laserdisc technology to be commercially released, although several other Laserdisc-based games exist as prototypes. The game cost operators at the time $3,799, which in 2021 dollars would be over $10,000 for the upright version, or about $4,300, which would almost be $12,000 today for a fancy cockpit version. The game was ultimately unsuccessful. Only 2,100 total games would be manufactured compared to the 12,000 game cabinets for Star Wars being produced, not just because of the price tag for operators, but disinterest from arcade patrons, and for quickly gaining a reputation as being an extremely unreliable game, thanks to a particularly dodgy Laserdisc player model that was installed in the game. Atari would try yet again in the March of 1984 with another movie licensed game, Cloak Dagger. Unlike the previous movie tie-in title Star Wars or Firefox, Cloak Dagger had been in development before the movie tie-in agreement and would become more of a prop in the film rather than an adaptation of the events in the film in video game form. Originally titled Agent X, Cloak Dagger is a multi-directional shooter designed and programmed by Russell Dahl. Gameplay is like other multi-directional shooters, such as Williams Electronics' Robotron 2084, with some interesting differences. In the game, you play Agent X, who is attempting to thwart the evil plans of one Dr. Boom in his elaborate underground lair and bomb factory. Each level is full of creatures, lava pits, and a shockingly large number of conveyor belts. Agent X attempts to cross one side of each room to the other, avoiding dangerous items and creatures, along with collecting items such as maps, which become useful in future levels to avoid mines. In the center of each level is a bomb, which acts as sort of a timer to complete each level. A player can use the igniter button to light the bomb early, which in turn speeds up the timer for bonus points upon exiting the level. The game also features fun animations in between each levels, with a large sprite of Agent X riding on an elevator doing various activities such as playing with a yo-yo or sweating if you had a close call in the previous level. The final level features a boss fight with Dr. Boom himself on floor 32, although I think it's actually level 33 if you're counting correctly, of his compound. Those defeating Dr. Boom are treated to a very quick look at the top secret plans Agent X has saved from the evil Dr. Boom. Agent X was, like many games at Atari, in development and a testing phase around 1982 through 83 at the company. During the phase of development in which the game was being prepped for a possible full release, Universal Pictures reached out to Atari about the possibility of creating a video game for their new film in pre-production called, you guessed it, Cloak Dagger. The film Cloak Dagger is a Cold War-themed spy film based on a Cornell Woolrich story, The Boy Who Cried Murder, which had been adapted to several films previously over the years. The film Cloak Dagger stars Henry Thomas as Davy Osborne, who rose to fame playing the lead character Elliot in the film E.T., and longtime Hollywood character actor staple Dabney Coleman in a dual role, both as Henry's overworked single-parent provider and as the imaginary spy Jack Flack, or Agent X. Davy's character can be moderately described as an obsessive gamer, deeply involved with the video games and kind of RPG pen and paper style gaming, especially ones based around the Jack Flack character and universe, which is kind of like a fake James Bond kind of character. Davy becomes mixed up accidentally in the smuggling of top secret plans for a stealth bomber when he witnesses a murder and is given an Atari 5200 cartridge of Cloak Dagger, which, by the way, contains a secret microchip with those plans that is activated when a player reaches a certain score playing the game. Good thing Davy had a 5200 and say not in a television, or this would have been a much shorter film. Due to Davy's overactive imagination and also writing his name on a softball he drops at the murder scene, the bad guys find out where he lives and he only has his imaginary friend of Jack Flack to help him when the guns come out, and he runs all over San Antonio, Texas, trying to get someone to believe him. Retro gaming fans tend to love this movie since it's full of vintage Atari gaming goodness and advertising all over the place. Several of the Atari home video game titles and the Game Shop Davey frequents in the film were never actually released, including, ironically, Cloak and Dagger, along with home versions of Atari's classic Tempest. It's important and interesting to mention again that Cloak and Dagger is a unique movie tie-in concept for the time period, since it isn't based on actual events in the film compared to the Star Wars or Firefox arcade game. Also, it's interesting that Cloak and Dagger was not a film released by Warner Brothers, Atari's parent company, so Warner Brothers really didn't have a stake in the film at all. Universal was interested in using Agent X since it was themed somewhat similarly to the spy themes in the script already, which had been written several years before. Universal Pictures had originally intended to use Nintendo's Donkey Kong as the video game cartridge in the movie, according to early versions of the script. Universal also gives the original title of Cloak and Dagger several shout-outs in the film itself. The Jack Flack character explains while hidden in the trunk of the car at one point in the movie that he used to be known as Agent X.
Agent X, help! Help me! Get him off me!
Crowded enough for you in here?
Now, over on the arcade front of things business-wise, the industry was starting to move towards selling conversion kits for operators as a cheaper alternative to buying a whole new game for a location. Cloak and Dagger would only be sold officially as a conversion kit. Dedicated units technically do exist, housed in the same cabinet style as the dedicated upright Crystal Castles machines, but they were only made for testing and prototyping purposes and never officially offered for sale outside of Atari. Atari wisely marketed Cloak and Dagger as a kit specifically for older titles from rival game manufacturer Williams Electronics. Targeted for cabinets such as Defender, Robotron, Joust, and Stargate, Atari was able to tap into a rather large pool of possible arcade game cabinet conversion needs, since most of the above titles sold very well and by 1983-84 might not have been earning as much money for operators as they had in the past. Kits included specifically dedicated control panels for the machine. The Defender cabinet uses a somewhat different style of overlay and control panel than other Williams titles and was shipped with a different control panel for that version of the kit. PCB, a PCB cage, a filter board, wiring, side art, a marquee, and instructions. The game PCB uses the previous Williams game power supply and audio amplifier. Specific production numbers of Cloak and Dagger kits from Atari is unfortunately unknown. I would personally estimate as few as 1,200 kits, and maybe as many as 2,000 kits were made and distributed. The game is uncommon today, but is sought after by collectors thanks to its rarity and the movie tie-in. Defender cabinet-based conversions to Cloak and Dagger seem much more common than any other Williams cabinet. This could be because Williams made over 60,000 Defender games, and at the time of Cloak and Dagger's release, it would have been the oldest title out of the Williams catalog in which these games were targeted towards. Atari seemed pleased enough with the arcade game to start working on versions for both the Atari 8-bit home computers and for the Atari 5200 game system. Unfortunately, with the market conditions for home video games in 1984 and Atari's eventual economic woes, the home versions would not be completed or ever see the official light of day. Today, only an incomplete prototype for the home computer version has been located by collectors. In the film Cloak and Dagger, even though Davey is seen playing the game on an Atari 5200, the version shown in the film is simply the arcade game ported through a monitor, and the product boxes are just mock-ups. By the mid-1980s, Atari was sold off and broken up into two different companies, Atari Corporation and Atari Games. Atari Corporation would focus on home computers mostly, but eventually would get back into home video game systems, while Atari Games would continue to produce arcade games up until about the early 2000s. Atari Games would release several games based on movie properties and television properties over the years, including one based on the 1989 Tim Burton Batman film. Cloak and Dagger is a unique and interesting title, providing some great outside-of-the-box thinking in both gameplay, design, and even marketing. It goes down as the only game the pre-broken up 1984 Atari released solely as a conversion kit. The game also showcases a unique way of attempting to tie in a video game product into a cross-media property without producing an inferior product along the way. It's a shame Cloak and Dagger was released in the year during so many economic woes for Atari and the gaming industry. Otherwise, it may have found a more widespread success and a home release. Although the title today may not be very recognizable outside of hardcore arcade game collectors and enthusiasts, it's a very entertaining and important piece of Atari's history.
Let's talk about the challenge level. Cloak and Dagger isn't a walk in the park. It requires a combination of quick reflexes, strategic thinking, and resource management. Difficulty ramps up as you progress, keeping you on your toes, ensuring that each playthrough remains engaging. As for replayability, the game's unique blend of action and strategy make it worth revisiting. In conclusion, Cloak and Dagger is a true classic that showcases Atari's innovative approach to gaming. Is a combination of action and strategy along with its impressive graphics and sound for its time that make it a standout title in the Atari library. As we celebrate Atari's 50th anniversary, it is essential to revisit these classics that laid the foundation for the gaming industry we know today. What are your memories of Cloak and Dagger? Do you have any favorite Atari games? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more gaming content, ring the notification bell to stay updated. Until next time, keep gaming my friends, and as always, stay legit.